Dan Ariely, thank you so much for accepting my invite to talk.
My pleasure. It was lovely to meet you a few weeks ago, and I'm looking forward to continuing our relationship.
Great, great. I have so many things to ask, so many things to cover. I'm a big fan of your work, and there are so many intersections between the topics that you cover and discuss in your books and in your lectures and your talks and what I talk about. So let's get started. Very first question is one of my favorite topics, probably my favorite topics. I grew up in the south of Italy, this region called Calabria. 2000 years ago used to be part of the so-called Magna Graecia or Greater Greece. So the ancient Greek influence is very strong in my education, in my culture, in my career. And there is this story that I fell in love since the very first time I learned it, which is the story of Harmony. Harmony was a goddess in the ancient Greek mythology, and she was created to inspire women and men in their search for balance, in their search for managing contradictions. And their, even back then, the world was full of contradictions. And today it's probably even worse. But the reason why I was inspired by this story is that the goddess that they created, Harmony or Harmonia, to inspire wise women and men looking for this balance and this way to reconcile contradictions. She was the goddess of Ares and Aphrodite, so the god of war and the goddess of love. So the idea was, let's find something to inspire, and she needs to be the daughter of two contradictions, the result, the product, if you want, of two contradictions. I think this story is amazing. And I think we live in a world that is full of contradiction. I'm talking about our world, but I'm also talking about the business world, if you want, right? So in the business world, we are even creating new words, merging existing words. We talk about glocal to mean something that is global, but also local. We talk about freemium. We talk about co-petition to say that we need something that is between cooperation and competition. We talk about phygital. We talk about prosumers when we try to involve our customers in an effort to co-create things with them, and so on and so forth. And in retail, we talk about B2Cization. We talk about, brick to clicks and a bunch of other portmanteau of different words. The reason being is that we struggle to figure out how to reconcile the contradictions of the world in which we live. How do you feel about that?
So I love this story, and I'll think about it more. But the first thought that comes to mind is that I like the fact that there's a goddess, Harmony. It's not two things that are fighting. They're creating something together. And the time I mostly use the term harmony is when I talk about work-life harmony. And maybe we can focus our discussion on what people think about contradiction on work-life balance versus work-life harmony. And the standard approach, I think, is work-life balance. And I hate this term. And the reason I hate this term is that I think that it undermines all the things that are both work and life. So I think that there are things at work we don't like doing, like bureaucracy. There are things in life we don't like doing, like dishes and laundry. But there are lots of things that are work and life. I call them work-life harmony. For example, there's a ton of books we haven't read. There are some books that are just work books and some books that are just life books. But there are lots of wonderful books that are both of them. Or say something different. Imagine somebody goes for a run to clear their mind. Are they working or are they taking care of life? Somebody has a pain and they go to the doctor to fix it. Are they going to fix their life or their work? It's both. We bring all of ourselves to life. And I think that this question of opposition in work-life balance is basically saying it's either work or life. No. In fact, we're not achieving our human potential if we think about work-life balance. We should think about our life as work-life harmony. How do we create a situation where I don't know if I'm at work or not? Think about our first meeting was in a lovely conference over a glass of wine. Were we working or were we having fun? Right now, I learned from you this great story about harmony. Am I working or not? I think that's what we should. Now, can we do it all the time? Of course not. But we should do as much to to get to it. So my take of your story and my kind of view on work-life harmony versus balance is that we should think about win-wins. Yes, sometimes things are in opposition, but sometimes we can think about how do we get them to be both. Maybe it's a new discovery. So I think for me, this is kind of the issue. How do we get the benefits of both sides and not think of them as opposing, competing forces?
I really love the way you frame it. First, because that's exactly the Greek idea of balance. So, how to keep everything together and how to build win-win situations. But I also like it because we tend to think that this idea of work-life integration or harmony, as you say, is the result of the hyper-connectivity, the fact that we have a mobile phone. But the way you frame it suggests that this is not the blurring lines are not the result of a smartphone. It's just the way life has always been. And this research for harmony, as we know now from the story that I shared,
Yeah.
it's actually the same old story. So I really love that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for reframing it. Let me move to the next topic. We both cover the idea that people lie or that humans genuinely are not transparent, at least not always, from different angles. The way I frame it typically is, especially when I work with companies, when I advise companies that are going through a process of D2Cization, so they try to become more direct to consumer. They try to develop their own channels and to rebalance the weight between wholesale channels, so intermediate channels and direct channels. I tend to focus on the fact that the more they will get close to the customer, the more they will be direct, the more they will have a direct relationship with customers, the more they will have to deal with the fact that people are not necessarily transparent. And so whether they ask people about something, or maybe their opinion, or maybe what they want, what is the product they want or the service they want, or they try to analyze data like behavioral data, trying to infer what they want and need and desire, what they get in terms of what they derive from the data, the information that they create, it's not necessarily that easy to infer and to derive because the starting point is not necessarily true. And I push the concept to the point that I tell companies when they do direct to consumer, I encourage them to think that the same acronym for direct to consumer is the same acronym for don't trust customers, right? So whatever they say, whatever data suggests, please think twice. Now, of course, it's a provocation, but I know you've done a lot of research on this. So what is your take on the fact that people lie and that companies shouldn't trust customers?
Yeah, so I think the framing don't trust your customer is different than people lie, and it has a couple of more elements. So let's start with don't trust your customer. My first answer is not that people necessarily lie, but they actually don't know. So, imagine take something very simple. I ask people, you look at saving rates for retirement in the US, and you say, why did you decide to save this amount? And people tell you all kinds of stories. What really determines how much they save? The default rate when they join the company. So there are lots of things that when you ask me for a reason, I tell you a lot of reasons, I tell you a story, but I'm not really aware of what's driving me. When we ask people, why do you love your significant other? They will give you a story, but it's not necessarily the right story. For example, almost nobody says it's their smell, but we know that in romantic love, smell is incredibly important. But we don't have a language for smell. We don't. So first of all, when we ask people questions, I can certainly ask you what you did yesterday, and then of course there's the planned dishonesty, but that's not as common. I would say that the first thing is lack of awareness, and the second thing would be motivated reasoning. What we want to be true, and we start believing that.
Would you say that the character and the attitude also play a role? Maybe some people prefer to get ready for the worst, and so when you ask them something, they tend to focus on the on the negative aspects, or to prepare themselves for something that maybe won't happen. And other people are half full glass persons, and they prefer to focus on on the pod, they tend to oversell, they tend to fake it until they make it, and they are more optimists. And so the way, let's say, building on what you've said, when they cherry pick the information, when they give you the answer, they tend to cherry pick them, let's say, the day they were told her.
Yeah. So there are individual differences. I would say that we're all motivated in a similar way. Let me do that. So I think yes, we all are driven in the same direction, but some of us are driven more and some are less. So there's some differences. But first approximation, I would examine to what extent is the ego really driving a different desire on those questions.
You mentioned that we met in Italy during a conference. And of course, Italy is my beloved country, even though I haven't lived there for a while. And if there is one thing is Italy and Europe in general, maybe, is known for, is bureaucracy. Now, bureaucracy is a word you've done a lot of research on. You wrote a lot about it. And so I think you are the best person to ask you this question. On the one hand, if you ask me about bureaucracy, my quick reaction would be, I hate it. It slows down everything. It's boring. It's one of the main reasons I would never consider working for the public sector, and so on and so forth. So my reaction to whatever bureaucracy is, I hate it. Having said that, sometimes we need it. Sometimes we need frameworks. Sometimes we need rules. We need regulation. And if there is one thing that scares me and excites me at the same time, a bit ambivalent, today is generative AI and the potential of generative AI. I try to understand as much as possible about AI, about the business implications of AI, but I'm also a bit concerned, although I understand the potential, I'm a bit concerned about the negative externalities, as we call them in the business world. And the reason is very simple. This is the first time in human history in which we have a non-human agent able to create, to tell stories, to act in a way that is quite close to the way human brain works. And again, I'm saying close, I'm not saying it's the same. I know it's scary. And we have two different approaches. We have Europe, which probably as a result of the immense bureaucracy tends to say, wait a minute, let's make sure we have a proper regulatory framework, we have clear rules, and then we let companies create, launch products, and so on and so forth. And then you have the United States and perhaps also China that are a different school of thought. They are like, no, this is not the way it works. You need to give freedom to the market. You need to let companies create products, and then you need to regulate. There is always time to regulate. Let's leave let's unlock the full potential, and then let's regulate. I'm a bit ambivalent because on the one hand, I do agree that we should unlock the full potential. On the other hand, I feel this is big, and I'm not sure it is a good idea to let it free and go and create, and because it will be probably too late to catch up afterwards. What is your opinion on this?
So let's first say a couple of things on the bureaucracy. And, being in Italy is a good place to observe even some of the good bureaucracy. For example, I went to see a factory that make Parmesan. Very specific regulated. How many hours, how many days, what salt, what cows, how do you store it? Somebody knocks on the Parmesan to know that, or, balsamico. I mean, there's all these things that are, the specific recipe is creating the tradition and the beauty and so on. Now, there's not many innovation because of that. Somebody told me that they think that the reason that the Italian food is such high quality is because there's so much regulation on farming, food, animals, and so on. So that's saying a good thing about bureaucracy. Sometimes it's about procedures, pride, and so on. The things that worry me about bureaucracy are bureaucracy that is not well reasoned. Process is basically saying to people, we don't trust you, we don't care about your time, and we don't want you to innovate. When we have things where we want people to be proud of their craft and do the same thing over and over, there's something beautiful about the process. When it's somewhere that we want people to innovate and renew and so on, bureaucracy could be tremendous. Like in farming, you don't have many things that you say, I have no idea why I do this. No, it's clear where it is in the process. In government bureaucracy, there's lots of things that says, but I already gave you this form. Why do I have to give it to you again? Stuff like that. That's offensive. So I think that there's some good bureaucracy. Most of it is not good, especially in the area of human motivation and innovation. In terms of AI, I think that the big framework is risks and benefits. What are the potential downside? What's the potential upside? And it's an area where we can imagine the upsides, but I don't think we understand the downsides. And the downside could be very dramatic and very frightening. And the reason they could be dramatic and frightening is because we have bad actors. If we assume that things are going to be used for good, but then they fall into the hands of bad actors, what will happen? Right? So, we all remember that just a few years ago, we thought that social media would be the tool for creating democracy and peace. I don't know if you remember the Arab Spring. There was tremendous use of Facebook and Twitter. This is the people. Fast forward a few years, now we think that those tools are instruments of evil, not because the algorithm has changed, just because people with very bad intentions have started joining. Like if you look at X compared to LinkedIn, very different story. X has anonymity, LinkedIn doesn't. The amount of conspiracy theories and hate speech and so on X is incredible. LinkedIn, relatively. I think that here you have some social networks that have the potential of destroying democracy. We worked so hard to try and create a type of government that is for the people and for everybody and promoting equality and so on, and we're getting away from it with these tools. So I think that because there are people with bad intentions, this is the issue. So if you ask me what should we do, I think we should regulate who has access to it initially, because I'm less worried about, people with good intentions getting hold of it and finding a way to do X, Y, or Z. I'm more worried about getting people with bad intentions to start using it. So that would be the first thing I would regulate. And then the second thing I would regulate is I would regulate some kind of a mechanism to stop things or to backtrack or to slow. Do we want to shut it off completely? Maybe not. But do we want to figure out some mechanisms for if it's so I think that's what I would do. So I would allow people to experiment and so on, but I wouldn't let everybody experiment. I would get commitment to be willing to shut things off if we discover that this is not working in the right direction. But that would be kind of my regulatory framework. Just imagine, take the issue of war. We have drones, very hard to protect against drones. Now imagine drones that are faster and AI. Right? What's the limit? Very, very frightening.
Yeah, it is. And I guess one of the reasons why it's hard to make up our minds in terms of whether or not it's good or bad, to build on what you have just said, is that it is hard to understand all the implications and all the potential evolutions at the same time. So drones powered by AI are scary, but perhaps in parallel with the same technology, we will have tools to prevent drones from doing bad. Right. So it's hard because, in economics, you tend to use this idea of ceteris paribus, which means all other conditions staying the same. The problem is that this is a broken concept. The other conditions won't stay the same in a world that changes at the speed of an algorithm. So it's also hard to predict the evolution of one thing, considering that all of the things will evolve in parallel at the same speed.
And as society is moving forward, we are becoming more fragile. We have social networks now that have billions of people. It has some positive issues, but it's incredibly vulnerable. We have people flying in planes all over the place. Incredible, but one virus can very quickly spread to everywhere. So globalization is putting us at a tremendous risk. We make lots of assumptions. I heard a statistic that when McDonald's makes their hamburgers, they make so many. One cow who is sick eventually would, not just the number of hamburgers that come from a cow, basically everything that comes out. And And it's a metaphor for me for how the modern life is becoming more vulnerable. Like one terrible person can destroy it for lots and lots of people. So if you think about that, as society is becoming more open and so on, we make it easier proportionally for one person with negative intention to create a lot of harm. Then I think we're in a place that we need to be very careful about that. Right, and I think I'm going to apologize for this metaphor, but one drop of poop in a pool of water makes everything disgusting. And so because of that, by the way, I don't think we understand how vulnerable we are. And because of that, we need to protect ourselves to a higher degree. And, mostly when we think about progress, we're not really thinking about bad usages. We're not thinking about the evil, bad intentioned people who are trying to take advantage of that.
Would you say that this is one of the reasons why people are becoming, so this fragility, this vulnerability is one of the reasons why people are becoming even more risk averse? Because the reason I'm asking is, I know you've done a lot of research on this, and during our conversation in Milan, and also during your talk, you told this great story about why people are risk averse, right? So we evolved from back in the day in the savannah. A little mistake could cost our life. And so, of course, eating the wrong mushroom or eating or fighting with the wrong animal or saying a bad word or whatever other reason would cost our life. And so clearly our brain and our entire civilization, if you want, evolved around this idea of protecting the comfort zone, heuristics, mental shortcuts, and trying to protect our ecosystem to some extent, right? And so that's probably the scientific explanation. And it's also the reason why, even in communication, we know that if people tend to listen to someone else like this, they're showing their full neck, which means that they are happy to be vulnerable and they're happy to tell the other person subconsciously that they don't feel threatened, right? So we're still those animals, even though we evolved. At the same time, due to this increased vulnerability and fragility, we have way more reasons to be risk averse. So would you say that this is even increasing the risk aversity for a good reason, maybe?
So basically, there are three big buckets of things that get us to not take risk. Our evolutionary history, as you said, right? A person in savannah could die if they make a bad mistake. If they make something good, they'll only get, another food for a day. Social, right? If we betray somebody else, if we do something bad for somebody else, society has a reason to want us not to take risks when it comes to other people. And then the way we structure our environment. Now, if you think about what has changed, is that in the savannah, we had lions. We don't have lions anymore. Like in our modern society, we have taken out a lot of those risks. The expected value has gone up, right? If you think about business risky decisions, on average, they pay off, right? In the savannah, on average, they were a mistake. Here, on average, they pay off. But what you're right is that the social risk has increased dramatically, because if I took a social risk a long time ago, I saw a cute woman. I said something to her. I said, I don't know how come, but I am infatuated with you. I would say something, right? In the old world, maybe she would be happy, maybe she would be upset. And if she was upset, maybe she would tell two other people. Now she has the doomsday machine, and she can complain to everybody online, and my life is over. So on the personal risk side, the risk used to be high, it's now low. On the social risk, it used to be low, now it's high. And it's very apparent, and people are very afraid. People are very afraid, very fearful. And you see lots of negative consequences for that. It's always a mixed issue, right? It's very nice that people don't harass each other. It's nice that people are less prejudiced for anything wrong that they do. And I told him the same story I just told you, is that if they took responsibility, the punishment would be very severe. not from the school, from their friends. And I said, we can't just ask them to take responsibility without thinking about the social ramification.
That's a great point. The social pressure is very high. And I also like the idea of the different buckets. So maybe one is different, lower than in the past, but we still have another one that is so heavy that, it's just a different mix of ingredients to some extent. Love that. And this risk aversity is also plays a role also when it comes to business. Entrepreneurs, by definition, need to take some risk, need to create, if they want to create something. Innovation itself is such only if it's an experiment with a known outcomes. Otherwise, it's not real innovation. It's more linear than exponential, right?
Any innovation, and it's also important to understand that innovation is important for society. So if you had a friend and your friend came to you and say, I want to open a restaurant, most likely you should tell them, don't open a new restaurant. Most likely you will fail, you'll lose money, it's not worthwhile, don't do it. But how would you like to live in a city where nobody's opening restaurants? Not so much. Some of the risk-taking that people take might be not good for them, but very good for society. How do we, in innovation, education, all of those risks are usually or sometimes good for the individual, but they're very good for society. So how do we going? And if we are so harsh on risk takers, like imagine that anybody who had a restaurant and failed is going to have a cover story in the news.
No, that's a great point. This makes me think, and this is probably the last question. We're running out of time. This makes me think of something that was written, I think, in the 60s or early 70s, probably the end of the 60s, which is this idea of the Peter principle, which is in organizations, people rise and so get promoted until a level that the author called respective incompetence. So the bottom line is, if you're good, you get promoted. If you're very good, you get promoted again and again and again. And typically, when you stop being promoted or getting promoted, it's because you're not good enough to get promoted, which is completely fair. At the same time, it means that most of the people out there who have the responsibility to run organizations, they are not necessarily the ideal person to make decisions because they got to the point where they're not good enough to be promoted, so they're not the best. Otherwise, they would have been promoted. But still, they're there training the next generation of managers, making decisions, making important decisions, and so on and so forth. Do you think this is still current and probably linked to what we said before in terms of taking risk and being entrepreneurial and maybe promoting people who are not according to the conventional criteria? They're not the right people, but they have something. And so maybe we should hire more people just because we feel that they could bring value, even though conventionally they don't have the right criteria. In an unstable, turbulent, unpredictable world, do we need to change also the way we promote people?
By some Italian authors, I don't remember off the hand, and they compared what happened to a system where you promote people in this way and get them to get stuck when they cannot get promoted versus when you promote people randomly. And they show that random is better. Of course, it depends on how big is the effect. By the way, this problem becomes bigger when the promotion also changes the job description. So for example, in a lot of technical organizations, you become a team leader. You're a good programmer, you become a team leader, but at some point you move to management. Maybe you have no idea how management works. You're a great programmer. You were even as a team leader on a programming project. It doesn't mean you know how to manage a group. Sometimes the skills really change. And then you say, we took somebody who was good at this, we put them. When the job description changes at the different levels, that problem become extra hard because by definition you would move to things that are not your strong suit. And yes, I think this instinct that people have for promotion is a very strong, understandable instinct. I want to be promoted. I want to feel that I'm making progress, and so on. I think the question is whether there are people who are great at their job, they would be great at their job, and what we're trying to do with the promotion is to get them to feel that we appreciate them, to feel that they're making progress. Maybe there are other ways to do it, rather than pushing them to a job that is not designed for them. So I think there are better ways to do it. and we need to stop equating promotion as an appreciation. I think they need to be, I mean, they could be related. I'm not saying they have zero relationship. Maybe we don't even use to use the term promotion. I think should be disassociated from recognition of a skill. I'll tell you, for example, I'm a university professor. I should never become a dean. No way, no way that this is a promotion. It's a different job with different requirements. Certainly, I'm ill-suited for that. No matter how good I am as a professor, don't make me a dean. Everybody would suffer, me included. So I just think we need to figure out a different way to get people to feel appreciated, to feel that they're making progress, to feel in control, than this movement between jobs.
What about the way we motivate people and the KPIs and the goals? Because there is a school of thought that's all about let's give people stretched goals, impossible to achieve. Even though we know they are impossible to be achieved, this will motivate them and they will over deliver compared to what they would do if we gave them a normal, achievable objective. And then there is another school of thought, which I tend to marry, which says, no, wait a minute. If you give people exaggerate goals, this will lead to frustration, or at least this will lead to a lack of respect for the authority, because they will just simply behave the way they would have behaved in any case. And they will just think, yeah, come on, we all know this is not achievable. Let's do our best and let's accept the fact that we would. So what's the motivation driver?
Yeah,
the
like, people, rather than for us to try and motivate people's motivation externally, it's just not the most effective way.
I think with this answer, you made the day of my good friend Jacopo, who is a big fan of your work and actually suggested me to cover this topic with you. Thank you so much, Dan. It was such an insightful and inspiring conversation. Thanks for your time. I didn't realize the time was flying. So thank you so much. It was very insightful and inspiring.
Of course, my pleasure, and looking forward to our next meeting.